I've always been skeptical of the measures that politicians use to assess the economy, both unemployment. I'm skeptical of that measure. I'm very skeptical of inflation measures, not in and of themselves, but I'm not convinced that those are sufficiently valid measures, reliable and valid measures to base our entire economic analysis on. And so I'm wondering is if you convert the cost to cost in time and standardize it in that manner, can you then rank order countries? If you take let's say a 50 commodity random sample of fundamental goods, can you then chart a progress graph of countries' relative move towards prosperity? And you do that year by year. Can you derive yearly indexes? And is that a good replacement for something like inflation, the inflation rate assessments?
In this case, we're trying to get a number that we could use as a proxy for the whole planet. And what we finally came up with is, let's look at GDP per capita per hour. So how much GDP is generated on the planet per hour worked? And let's use that as an index or a proxy for how productive people are getting, because we also note that when innovation occurs, it shows up both in lower prices and higher incomes. So it's important that time prices are actually capturing both of those values, because it's the ratio of those two numbers. So time prices actually contain more information than just a money price.
People think that they tend to think of change in human societies as the norm, and that is in some sense true compared to animal societies, which just don't change at all. I mean, a grizzly now is exactly the same as a grizzly was 60,000 years ago for all intents and purposes. But even in very technologically advanced cultures like ancient Egypt, which was a much faster developing country, let's say, society than the typical Stone Age society, there were periods of time in the Egyptian archaeological record that exceed 1,000 years where there's zero evidence of any technological change whatsoever. And so there are, and then if you go back, let's say, to so-called Stone Age civilizations, there's good anthropological evidence for the persistence of some rituals which left a certain archaeological mark, persistence of those rituals unchanged over a 20,000 year period. So the rule in biological systems is lack of change at the cultural level. And even among human societies, generally speaking, rates of change are unbelievably slow. And so for people to say, well, doubling every 20 years isn't fast enough, it's like, well, A, compared to what? And the other thing to think about is, well, how fast a doubling do you think we can stand? Because some of that is, I know you think, well, oh no, we're getting prosperous too fast. Isn't that a problem? If that's a problem you need to have, if you have to have a problem. But it is challenging, because our society is changing so rapidly now, it's actually hard for people to keep up with it. They get superannuated in some sense. So in any case, it's a remarkable set of observations. And it's very difficult to look at this without being really sad, I would say, in some sense, that we had to swallow so much apocalyptic nonsense for so many decades to the detriment of so many, when the evidence is starkly clear that more people in freer markets solves all the problems that everybody wants to solve faster than anything we've ever produced by a large margin.
The second problem that we need to avoid if we are going to remain superabundant is, of course, freedom of speech. Freedom of speech is absolutely fundamental. It is not only fundamental on a personal level. If you cannot speak freely, you cannot think freely, you cannot express yourself freely, but on a societal level. If you are following an idea of the cliff, it could be a bad idea. If it's a bad idea, then you are going to end up like going off the cliff, right? That was the problem in communist societies. I grew up under communism part of my life. And because we didn't have freedom of speech, people couldn't point out that the society was actually stagnating and in some ways retrogressing. and we couldn't come up with a way of resolving our problems and get on a better path. And that is why speech codes and banning of expression of ideas, no matter how offensive we may find them. After all, heliocentrism was offensive at one point in the past. But if we prevent these ideas from being aired, then we don't know really. Some of them may be very good, and we should remember them. And the third, we should learn from them. And the third potential problem for superabundance is, of course, if the market gets destroyed through overregulation or socialization. And the reason for that is very simple. Markets provide us with signals about what's valuable and what's not. Markets allow us to see which innovations are going to be useful and which innovations are going to be useless. This is what's called the price mechanism. In a free market economy, prices tell you exactly what you need more of, like baby formula in the United States, or oil and gas when it goes up, that you need to produce more of that.